welcome you to our podcast, On the Real Side. The tune you're hearing in the background is called On the Real Side and was written by my good friend, the great Walter Davis Jr. And we're, very happy to have today special guest, the great Grant Stewart. And hi, Grant.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy to have you.
Uh,
We go back quite a ways, as we'll get into. But the first thing I want to say about Grant, we're starting a little later today. Um, One of the reasons, and actually we're going to do the same thing next week, because some of the cats that we interview and converse with have actually teaching jobs. They're actually employed. Um, and I'm happy to announce that Grant is the head of, or as my grandmother would say, chief cook and bottle washer for um, a school downtown here in New York City, which is called the Tribeca Jazz Institute, and that's located in the Church Street Music School, which hasn't been on Church Street for ages, but it's actually on White Street in uh, in Lower Manhattan in Tribeca, which is very close to Canal Street. If you want to, we'll give you all that information of exact locations and everything. And I think I'm very happy for Grant to have that for a number of reasons. He's been traveling a lot, uh, going all over the world, as I did for many years. And so sometimes it's nice to be home and get to stay home, especially in Grant's current situation, uh, where I want to congratulate him expecting a child in December, right?
yes, December 22nd is the due date.
December 22nd.
Mm.
Another 22. I'm a 22.
Yeah.
There's a mystical thing about being born on the 22nd. I was reading
Mhm.
something like that because my daughter Anya is also a February
Oh,
22nd.
is she? I'm
Yeah, so there's something about 22. I'm not,
Mhm.
I'm sure somebody who's watching this
Sure
will
there's a
know all about
numerologist
that.
out there. Mm.
Yes, and let us know that.
Mm.
And his wife Lucy, who is an excellent singer, great singer, originally from Armenia,
Mm.
and we'll get into that a little later too. Anyway, they're expecting their first child, and we're excited about that. But just why don't we start with the school? Um, how did it come about? And there's a wonderful faculty, and you're getting students from all over the world. You told me the other day.
Yeah, yeah. People come from all over. This semester we have people from Denmark, Sweden, Japan, all over the states as
And
well.
these are adult students mostly, right?
Yeah, they're yeah. I mean, I designed a program for advanced players. It's kind of a almost a finishing school idea, kind of like a post, not necessarily post university or college, but for advanced players that don't necessarily need, 4 years of music
Of
school.
understanding what the third and the seventh mean.
Yeah, basically. But
you know, and
it's a,
where the
it's,
pocket is.
yeah, I mean, I wanted to make a school where I would teach the way I learned how to play, you know, and so I I came up with the idea and pitched it to Toby Wine at Church Street, and then we put it in motion. And he's not at Church Street anymore, but there's a wonderful Betsy Curlin and Teresa Lee, the directors there, are fantastic, and we made it happen. We got it rolling last January, so. It's yeah, it's very organic. It's the anti-school, and it's great. We're
Well,
having a
one of
ball.
the things you've done so well, just the idea of it's strictly basically teaching ensembles. And is there private study available as
There's
well?
private lessons. It's ensembles and private lessons.
Ensembles and private lessons, and the
Yeah.
people you put together um, are just wonderful. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who's on the faculty and
Yeah, we've got I mean drums, who's teaching drums. We've got Rodney Green, Joe Farnsworth, Kenny Washington, Willie Jones. Phil Stewart as well. Bass is David Wong, Paul Schiviare Roland. Trumpets, Bruce Harris, Jeremy Pelt, Joe Magnarelli, John Kelso. Tenor saxophone is myself, and Vince Herring, Eric Alexander, Harry Allen, Chris Byers. Let's see, guitar is Pasquale Grasso, Ed Cherry, Peter Bernstein. There's a lot of piano is David Hazeltine, Jeb Patton, Tardo Hammer, Michael Weiss. There's just a lot of great players.
As a friend of mine would say, you couldn't find anybody good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dream, it's a grand, and the, it's a very organic. I mean, it's the way I learned to play, hanging out with you, when I was a teenager. We would just play and talk about music.
Right. Well, I mean, I always tell people, kind of the way Grant and I met, to make a long story short, is actually our good friend Fabio Miano, who's a wonderful piano player who lives in Alicante, Spain now, was living in Toronto, and I spent some years in Toronto. And we went out to a club called the Say What. Wasn't that the name of the club?
Say What Cafe. Yeah.
Say What Cafe. And Fabio actually, I think, was had a friend there he wanted to see. I think I remember that. And he said, "Come on, we'll go down. We're here. They have a jam session. We'll play with some young cats, and we'll hear this." And these were mostly University of Toronto academic kind of kids, and they were all studying, and they were jamming, and they sounded pretty good. And I was saying, well, that's nice. And then these two high school kids got up, Grant and Jake Wilkinson, who's a wonderful trumpet player. At that time, he was playing valve trombone.
Valve trombone. Yeah.
And he was brilliant too. He just wasn't quite as accomplished as Grant. And Jake, he did his best at catching up, and he's a beautiful player. He's on one of my records.
Yeah.
We had a group in Toronto together with Don Tom, Archie Lean.
Yeah.
But I heard these two.
Jake's a great player. Yeah.
And I heard Grant, and basically I think I kidnapped you for like a week or so. I don't know if you even went to high school that week. I just took you to my house, and we hung out and played and talked music all day. And then I had a concert at the Toronto Jazz Festival coming up. And I think you were 16. Were you 16 or something?
Yeah, 16 or 17.
Yeah, and I said, well, we're practicing so much together, and we were learning a repertoire, and you already sounded great. And I said, you might as well play these concerts with me. So then you kind of got on my band for a while, and we did that, as I recall.
Yeah.
And and that was really, that's like the way I learned from Ira Sullivan and Lee Konitz, and I guess a mentoring system that at the time, I mean, I think had I asked you for money, you would have paid me, but I was actually doing pretty well with just traveling, and so whenever I was in Toronto, we'd get together and hang out.
Yeah.
And we never had money; was not a question of what we were dealing with, and so and also I got to thank you. Through the years, you've recommended a lot of people that study with you.
Yeah, of course. I always tell them.
Grant said to go see you, and also there've been a lot of the times people who hung out with me or studied with me, really, they get interviewed or they get some attention. They mention everybody they hung out with. I remember one guy and I said, wait a minute, he was with me for 2 years and he doesn't.
Right.
And I said, why did you? He said, oh man, I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess you learned so well.
Yeah.
But so you're doing that with them, and why don't we tell people later on when we do this show? We can't do it with the live feed, but we do it later when our good friend Jesse Kaiser puts the ornaments on it, or whatever you call it.
Right.
We'll show you how to enroll in the school, but you might say now, tell people if they're interested in enrolling, how they would do that.
You can go to the church. If you Google Tribeca Jazz Institute, it's the first thing that comes up, and you can contact us and audition through the website, or you can hit me up on Instagram. or the Tribeca Jazz Institute on Instagram as well. And we can set you up with an audition. And we're still registering people for January. There's still some spots left for January and April. So if anyone's interested, give me a shout. And we'll try and make it happen.
Well, while we're plugging our teaching, I'll just tell people that I have been doing a master class. I was doing it every week on Saturdays, and then I cut it down to twice a month and then once a month. And this is going to be my last one for a while because we're catching up with other things. So that's called Bob Mover Jazz Ability classes, and that's the last one for a while will be this Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's very inexpensive. And I'm also accepting private students. You can just get in touch with me as, Robert Mover, all small, lowercase, at gmail.com. And as Lee Konitz ad in the Village Voice read, it said, Lee Konitz now accepting students all levels, advanced, intermediate, beginners, and tone deaf. And I prefer the tone deaf to the very beginner. I think. And also, I personally don't really like to teach the saxophone that much. I'd rather teach instruments, as Grant does too. We teach people of all instruments, and would rather teach the music than the actual. There are people that we can tell you to learn the instrument from, and I only teach online. So that's just what I do. But getting back to Grant, okay, you were in Toronto and you were there as a teenager, and I never knew whether you actually finished high school or
we did. I did. I quit for a while in high school during the Say What days. I was going to an arts high school, and I was basically, I was
was it
practicing.
Claude Watson?
Yeah, Claude Watson, and I was practicing ridiculous. Like 10 hours a day. So I was skipping all my classes and going out and playing at night, and of course flunking out of all my classes. So I
That's
told my
when I knew
parents,
you.
I was like, look, I might as well just quit, and I'll go back and they let me quit. And that's a bit. My father was an English teacher, high school English teacher, and they were just like, all right, as long as you promise to finish. So I quit for a semester, and then I went back and finished
Right. I
up.
think when I met you, you were about to quit for a while, and that's why you could hang out with me so much.
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah,
around that time. And your dad, who was a wonderful man,
yeah,
and
yeah. He was a great guy.
your family is just a wonderful
Yeah,
family. We might as well talk about that for a minute. Norman,
sure.
his father,
Yeah.
was, I would say an amateur professional musician.
Yeah.
I don't know what was his actual profession.
He was a high school
English
English
teacher.
teacher
That's
at
right.
York Mills Collegiate for
That's right. He was a high school English
years.
teacher, which
Yeah.
you mentioned,
Hmm.
and he played guitar and piano.
Yeah. He was a working musician. He was a jobbing musician, like club dates on every weekend and church, or played organ at the church every Sunday morning. An incredibly hard worker. He'd teach full time and then, gig several nights a week and get up on Sunday mornings and play organ at the church and take us to all our lessons and our hockey games and everything. But he was an amazing musician. He was a guitar player mainly, but he was a beautiful pianist as well, and trumpet. He was I think one of his first instruments was trumpet, but
Wow.
yeah, he was a
So
country guitar player originally.
as Barry Harris would say to you, you were born into the music.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I had a great house to grow up in as far as music goes.
Yeah, and
Just
your
playing
brother.
constantly, and Phil as well. Yeah. But constantly playing, like from the time my earliest memories are reel-to-reel tapes of, Louis Armstrong and Louis Jordan, and my dad just playing tunes on the piano. He'd sit at the piano all the time, just playing tunes. That
Wow.
was,
And your sister Ellen is a good singer too.
yeah. Ellen was an amazing. I have uh, reel-to-reel tapes of Ellen when she was 3 or 4 years old, singing these unbelievably hard standards uh,
Really?
by memory and singing them perfectly. It's kind of crazy. I think she was 4 years old, when they recorded them. But yeah, my sister Ellen was a very talented singer as well. She didn't pursue it, but she sings for her own enjoyment still.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so he really understood then. Well, you mentioned that your dad played organ in church, and I was wondering, what church was it, and was you guys would, I guess, go to church with him, and how strong, in other words, like spiritually, I mean, where was your family?
It was a Catholic church. We grew up Catholic.
I never
I mean,
knew
we didn't
that
go to
about you.
Catholic. Yeah, we didn't go to Catholic school, but yeah. And my dad was actually he converted to Catholicism. He was a Protestant. It's funny when they got married. It was a big deal. They're from the east coast of Canada, from Prince Edward Island, and his family was Protestant. My mom's a Catholic. When they got married, it was a big scandal back then
Right,
for
that
a
was a
Protestant
big. I mean, to become a
Catholic.
Catholic was like becoming a
Yeah,
pagan.
yeah, basically. So he converted, and yeah, he was he was a great example of just a Christian that walks the walk, and he was just a beautiful person, very a good, I like, without being a Bible thumper, never forced us to go to church or do anything like that, but walk the walk.
Yeah, I always had a
Um,
feeling that there was
yeah.
a strong spiritual element to your family, but there was never any proselytizing about any
No,
religion.
yeah, it was very a spiritual, a spiritual person, not just a religious person.
Yeah, well, I think that's
Yeah.
my. You've always been a very self-actualized type of guy, and even though, and I same with Phil, and even though you guys might have fallen off the what my grandfather called the straight and narrow path for a little while in your youth, I never worried about you the way, say, I worried about Josh or something. You know what I mean? I
Right.
felt like when
Yeah.
when you were messing around, and you never really messed around with. We're not talking about hard drugs that much or anything like that.
Hmm.
But whenever you were doing something, I never had the feeling to worry. I said, well, he's doing a little experimenting, and
Yeah.
he'll get back on the course, because one of the reasons was I felt you had strong, such strong roots in your family, and that they had
Yeah.
actually, given you this moral center and ethical center that I
Yeah.
think,
I mean, I think it's just luck,
yeah,
honestly, because I've seen lots of people with stronger moral and ethical centers than myself, you know, be taken down by vices. So I think I just got lucky, right time at the right place to kind of cool out and get back on track. But
yeah. I just have the feeling sometimes with people, because I had I would say a pretty dysfunctional childhood.
mm,
For instance, my sister did a course at Harvard, Harvard Extension. I mean, she studied some psychology there, and one of
mm.
her courses was in child abuse. And she said she was reading the book and seeing these case histories, and she said, "I'm seeing these cases, and I'm wondering, well, where's the abuse? Where's it start?" She said, "You know, that's nothing like mom. I mean, mom was 10 times worse than that.
That's not abuse.
That's not abuse. You call that abuse, like Monty Python. You know what I mean? An argument. That's not an argument. So and so I think it was for me it was people like Ira
Mm,
Sullivan and Konitz and Sonny Rollins
yeah.
who actually, even though my dad had he tried in his way, you know what I mean. I
Mm.
won't. We're not. I'm going to see my analyst later after this, so
Right.
I'll save that for him. But
Get warmed up.
yeah, I'm just warming up. But I mean, I had strong father figures
Mm.
and people that kind of guided me in the direction that when I mean, Chet Baker was another older brother figure, like
Yeah.
an uncle figure. Like
Right.
Chet was like my bad uncle, but I loved him too.
Right.
So but I mean, fortunately, I did have these people that
Yeah.
and
Sure.
I saw that you'd had that in your life with your
Yeah.
family. But
But I mean, so much. So I look back on my my life so far, and I just see all the times I could have gone this way or that way, and I've just by chance happened to. I mean, even meeting you when I was young was very. It was just kind of luck and chance that I happened to I think I went down to Myers Deli one night and you were playing there. I think it's the first time I heard you. But I mean, there's so many instances where things could have gone, you know,
Well, that's kind of my
in many
theory
ways.
about what we call God. I mean, I can't sum it all up
Mm,
that simply, but definitely to me, a large part of it is the synchronicity with which things happen, and
mm,
what people might call serendipity.
yeah,
Just being in a certain place at a certain time and meeting somebody that's going to change your life
yeah,
in a way that you didn't know 10 minutes before you walked into that room that was going to happen. And, I mean, there are a lot of stories that bear that out.
mm,
And I find it really enriching to find how that works in different people's lives.
yeah,
It gives me a feeling that even though maybe I can never know the divine uh, spirit uh, exactly the way maybe a Catholic priest or a Hasidic Jew can in their way, I still have a lot of questions, but it's an affirmation and maybe a confirmation
mm,
of there's something beyond ourselves at work in the
yeah,
universe. And, that's, a profound thing.
mm,
So your path, let's talk about that. So you quit high school, you went back to high school, you finished high school in Toronto. Now the next thing I knew of you was I came back from Europe on tour, and somebody said, "Oh, Grant moved to New York," and I think that was Jake or somebody said I hadn't heard from you or something, and I said, "Oh, I got to get in touch with Grant," and they said, "Well, he's in New York."
yeah. I moved down with Jake. I moved down to New York with Jake.
So it probably wasn't Jake that told me; it was somebody
Mm,
else, maybe Josh or Jordan,
yeah,
one of the local
yeah.
cats. So why don't you continue it from there? How old were you, and what made you go back?
I just finished high school, so I guess I was 19. Because in Toronto at that time, high school went to grade 13. So
Right.
I got a Canada Council grant, and I came down and I took some lessons and hung out. Moved down with Jake,
Did you take
and
lessons
just
with when you got to New York? I'm just curious.
I took. I mean, I went to Barry's workshop, and I took some lessons with Donald Byrd and Joe Lovano and George Coleman, and and went to Barry's thing. I just hung out, made the scene, listened a lot.
Yeah, well, another interesting aspect of your career is that you were there for the early days of Smalls when Mitch had the club. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's the first time I heard about Smalls,
yeah,
and it really was just in its inception, I think.
yeah. It was before it even opened. This guitar, I can't think of the guitar player's name. I haven't seen him in years, but he was a
John
he.
Merrill was it?
No, no. It'll come to me. But he had met Mitch at a bar or something like that, and he called me up. He was like, "There's this guy opening this club next month in the Village, and I want to hire you for all these gigs, and it's going to be this." I was like, "What?" I'm like, "All right." And he's like, "Go down and check it out." So I went down there. It was before Smalls had opened, and I went down and Mitch is down there putting up
This
all the
is Mitch Borden, by the way,
Mitch
who now
Bordner.
has a club called Ornithology
Yeah,
in Brooklyn. Please
yeah.
continue.
So Mitch was down there, and it was true. He was opening up this club and it was bizarre. He had free. It was $10 to get in, and he had free beer and wine. It was like no
Free
liquor
beer and
license.
wine. I never
Free
knew
beer
that.
and wine for $10. And so that lasted for about a month until the cops came down. They were like, "You don't have a liquor license, and you can't charge a cover and give away booze." So then he just started giving away non-alcoholic beer and juice, and it went through a bunch of phases where at one point they had rice and beans. It was $10 to get in, and all the rice and beans you could eat. This is
That's funny.
with juice, but it was a great hang, and right off the bat, it was all the cats were playing there. I
So
remember, I think
you
the first,
were the Cats at that time. I remember Brad Meldow was relatively unknown.
yeah, Brad was down there, and Bernstein, and Jimmy Lovelace, and Ari, and Chris Byers, and Sasha, and Sasha Perry, and William Ash, and Frank Gant, and Frank Hewitt, and who else? Tommy Turrentine used to be down there all the time, although he wasn't at that point. He wasn't playing. I think his chops were completely gone, but he was down there hanging out. it was a great hang, and it was open all, you know, they had no liquor license, and it was open, so it was open all night.
Yeah,
We'd be
well,
in there
I
till
remember
six
some
in
of
the
those
morning.
days. The
Yeah,
sessions would end when I came back to New York.
yeah.
He kind of brought me down there, and
Mm,
Sasha Perry and I would play. I mean, after everybody went home, we'd be there until 8 o'clock in the morning playing
yeah.
duets. And
Before the webcast, before the cameras were in there, thank God.
yeah, it really that changed things. The
Yeah,
I mean, among the if the cameras were in there, everybody would be in jail.
yeah, right.
But you know, so yeah, you did that, and that was and then you started to tour a little bit, and you made a couple of records.
Yeah,
Let's
I
talk
did. I
about.
mean, I did my first record for Crisscross, I think in '91 or '92. I was 21, I think, 2021. Uh, and it was a big deal to do a record back then. It was before, you know,
Before
before you could,
self-produced records.
yeah, you couldn't really do your own CDs back then. So it was a big deal. And Jerry Teekins at Crisscross, we had a gig at the 11th Street Bar, which was on 11th Street in between B and C. And it was me and Johnny Ellis and Spike and I think Neil Miner was on bass.
That's the same
And
11th Street Bar.
Magnarelli.
That's the same.
No, no. Oh, sorry, not the 11th Street Bar. I'm losing it. The ST Bar.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't
ST
know
Bar. It was
the
11th
11th.
between B and C. It's down the street from the 11th Street Bar where we play now. But that was in like the early '90s, and we were down there, and Jerry Teekins came and heard us there, and he gave me a shot. We did a record, and it was me. The record we did was me and Magnarelli and K Wash and P Wash and young Brad Meldow on piano, and so then with that, I kind of started touring and doing gigs. And
Yeah,
made it
that's a
over
good
to
record.
Europe.
I heard that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was very young on it, but I'm very grateful for Jerry Teekins to Teekins for giving me a shot. Um, and then I did another, then I just started recording for him then, and did some more for Fresh Sounds, and later
And
on for a record label called Sharp Nine that Mark Edelman had.
uh,
Yeah,
so
and
were
then
you like your own? Like I mean, I used to in those days and the 25 years that I toured as a single and sometimes with Walter Davis or whatever. I would get up at or make sure I was up and relatively coherent at 5 in the morning to call Europe at
yeah,
11 in the morning because Paul Bley had told me, he said, just about every agent in the world is in their office at 11.
yeah,
Try to get them between 11 and noon their time, and you'll be able to pursue a
yeah.
career. So I would do that, and staying up and making sure I was coherent at that hour. And uh, so is that kind of what you did? How you were really? I don't remember you ever really having an agent.
I didn't. Well, I mean, I did work with. Once I started going over there, I mean, my first gigs over in Europe were with Fabio Miano, and then some other people in Spain and Italy started booking some stuff. A lot of the same people that you worked for. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was that thing of it was a different world back then. You had to call people and talk to them. There wasn't internet. There wasn't really internet. Yeah, there wasn't any internet. I don't even know. Yeah, probably not until the early 2000s did people really start using it over there, if I'm remembering correctly. But I mean,
yeah,
back then in the early mid '90s, you had to mail stuff. Everything had to be mailed, and you had to catch people on the phone, and it was incredibly expensive to call long distance. There's no Skype. There's no WhatsApp. So it was like calling cards, scratch off calling card things, and
and going to get your resume
yeah,
Xerox,
your press kit, and
the
send
press
it.
kit. That's the word I'm.
Yeah,
I haven't
I
used the
mean,
word press kit in so long I couldn't
yeah,
remember.
it's,
But
it's it was a
that's
different it
what
was
we
a
would
different
do.
world.
And one thing I do miss about it in a way was that there was more direct contact with the people. Like you'd get to know uh, the people that love the music.
Hmm.
Maybe there were two or three people in each country that were bookers,
Yeah,
and and beyond there being bookers and businessmen, it wasn't just really, you actually got to develop friendships with these people.
Yeah.
And some of them, like Jordi
Yeah.
Sunyol,
Jordy's
well,
still going. Yeah.
yeah, who I never became that close to, but I always liked him.
Yeah.
Because when I'd go to Spain, Fabio would do the business, and
Hmm.
so I didn't really get to know Jordan too well. But in other countries, I would get to know the
Sure.
cats that really,
Yeah.
and I found that was in later years, I stopped touring because of my tracheostomy.
Hmm.
For who you haven't seen this, I can't really travel.
Right.
I can't really fly. I mean, I can, but if anything happened to me on the plane,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be good. And
Mm.
even just after what happened to Barry Harris when he went to Europe last time,
Right. Mm.
and couldn't get back in his condition, it's just
Hmm.
better that I stay. But
Yeah.
before I stopped touring, which was about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, it was a whole different thing. You had to. It was more impersonal. Everything was,
Yeah.
you know. But so you started to tour, and you kept that up, and you've made what? You've got about 12, 15 records out now.
I think it was 20 as a leader, and yeah, I don't know how many as a side man, but quite a few. So
Yeah,
basically, we're doing a record every couple of years, more or less. But yeah, I did a bunch for Sharp Nine, then I did a bunch. I did quite a few for some Japanese labels. I used to work a lot in Japan, and then some for Smalls Live, and then the last label I've been working with the last few years is Corey Weed's Cellar Live, and so Corey's a good friend of mine.
yeah.
So he's
Corey's a nice cat.
yeah,
Actually,
it's a great guy.
I've got this Walter Davis Jr. concert that
Oh,
we did,
that's right.
in
That's right. Yeah.
which the tape has been going around, and
Mm.
my friends have heard it. And that was actually in 1988 we recorded
Wow.
that. And I've had that tape for years, and nobody ever wanted to put it out. I can't say I really broke any bones trying to get it out,
Yeah.
but I finally go through to John Bennett, a
Hmm.
wonderful, wonderful guy, radiologist who just loves the music, kind of a jazz saint.
Mm. Yeah.
We have a few of them, and not that many, but there's now and then they crop up in your life.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, let me." He's good friends with Corey, and
Hmm.
so now finally this year, well, I mean, in 2024 it should come out.
Mm.
I'm
Great.
happy with that,
Yeah, I can't wait to hear.
and so I think that's good. He's one of those people that loves the music.
Hmm.
He's not just in it, And I found that the larger labels, well, they had people that love the music in their way too.
Mm.
So I can't do. There's no
Sure.
generalizations that could be made for that.
Mm.
Um, let's talk a little bit about influences. You're when I first heard you, you were sounding probably as much like Sonny Rollins as I'd ever heard anybody
Mm.
sound, and you were 16, and that influence has remained. But I hear a lot of other cats in you too now.
Mhm.
You know, including some of myself.
Mhm.
But I mean, I know that you've completely listened to the history of the tenor. One influence that I find that you don't exhibit, which no put down of who those who do or the source is John Coltrane. It's apparent that you heard Train,
Mhm.
but you're not someone that I would say exhibit an influence of that. In fact, I was wondering about. There's so many more people, I guess, and Coltrane is actually in some ways more complicated than Sonny as far as what he's the complexity of what he's playing harmonically and everything.
Mhm.
But you hear many more people that have the access to Train's style than people that are really coming out of Sonny.
Mhm.
And I always I wonder, what do you think? Why do you think that happens?
I mean, Train was a big influence on me. I listened to a lot of Train, transcribed a lot of Train when I was young. I mean, I love Train. I think what I the part of Train that I really loved was his lyrical sense. Like I loved his, especially that period, with the Europe stuff with Miles, where he just has like almost an operatic kind of aria vibe from his solos. I mean, beautiful giant melodies that I always loved in his playing, and also his. I mean, I hear the same intensity and kind of I want to call it like rocking rock, like that same rawness and kind of rockingness that I hear in like Bird at St. Nick's, and that I hear in like good rock music. It's just like a raw kind of energy that I love.
Like
That
a
I
sense of
that I.
abandon.
I mean, I have I hear it in you. I mean, I hear it from your playing as well, and that's always something that I love from Train, and that I got from Train. I also like just his work ethic and his just dedication to the instrument, and kind of that searching aspect of him I always identified with. So he was a huge influence on me, but it just doesn't come through.
No,
It
I
doesn't come
would
through
say
in my playing. It
no.
does.
Well, I
It just,
remember us
it's not.
listening to Train, and
Yeah.
listening to that period that produced "If There Is
I
Someone
love
Else
you.
Living You," and "I Love You," and the Lush
Yeah.
Life record, especially the
Yeah, I
side
remember
trio.
hanging. I remember hanging out at your place when you were living with Dave Hutchinson and listening to Lush Life, that recording.
Right, the side two, and the "I Hear a Rhapsody," and
Yeah, with
"Like Someone in
Earl
Love."
Day on bass. Yeah,
The "Like Someone in Love" is one of the most beautiful things in the world.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
also have a very strong Coltrane
Mm.
influence, but it's more of a spiritual thing, and the feeling that
Mm.
feeling of abandon and sort of taking qualities from someone
Mm.
as opposed to literally the notes.
Yeah.
Like I heard so many of his notes. I mean, I used to jam, especially I would play these jam sessions with Mike Brecker, Bob Berg,
Mm.
Grossman, and Liebman, and
Yeah.
those cats were so influenced by Train
Right.
and in their own beautiful ways that I would get a lot of that through osmosis.
Right. Right.
And but then I'd go and listen to my middle period
Mm.
Train that I liked very much. But I think that maybe the thing with Sonny is this all encompassing. I think it has to do with time feeling
Mm.
that even though Train swung like mad, and I'm
Mm.
not really comparing them because that's for stupid
Yeah.
critics to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, so you get this from that guy, and you get that from somebody else,
Mm.
and you get, that sense of abandon Train has, but then
Yeah.
Sonny has that combined restraint and then the abandon, and you never know when
Yeah.
he's going to surprise you with that. Once
Sure.
Train took off, then he was off.
Yeah.
It's like a racehorse, it was
Mm.
there. And Sonny was like more like he'd kind of look at the scenery for a minute and then gallop. And
Right.
then,
Right.
which is kind of like sort of Bird could do that in his own way as well.
Mm.
But I mean, I just find that I hear, and maybe it's because the media also has canonized Train in a certain way, as great as he was, and kind of possibly because Sonny didn't, maybe because of some of it could be Sonny's own thing that in later years he kind of played more. He said he wanted to get back to his Louis Jordan
Mm.
style
Right.
and the kind of stuff that originally attracted him, which was the simplicity and that kind of thing, which sometimes, even though he was still capable of playing all that saxophone, it wasn't as uh, it seems that even though critics everybody writes he's the greatest improviser of
Mm.
all time and all these things and they laud him, but they uh, I just feel that he's not mentioned as much as he could be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so and you even yourself, um, there's a period after RCA, let's say after the bridge,
Mm.
around that time, and in general, it's interesting. Like I was thinking that in my generation, uh, there was a certain way because Ornette had just come out 5 or 10 years before that. It was relatively new. And
Mm,
Crane had Eric Dolphy, and even things like Ascension had already happened. And there was a kind of way of playing in and out
mm,
that people were sort of expected in a certain way to be able to do,
mm,
or at least you would experiment with freer forms and
mm,
that kind of thing. I mean, Sonny made East Broadway Rundown, and there was a looseness to even the Alfie record
mm,
that had there not been an Albert Eiler, you wonder there was even a short and Archie Shepp, and they were playing more outside. So
right,
cats like Ira Sullivan, Lee Konitz, Rassan Roland Kirk was somebody who really epitomized coming from in and out and that
right.
kind of thing. And I don't think that was it your generation or you or in other words like you. I don't remember you ever kind of like like Steve Lacy was stretching the boundaries
Mm.
of things. What's your philosophy about that?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, in the early, I played a lot with like Omer Avital, and Omer's group was kind of doing that, was kind of going in between it and, playing in and out kind of. Uh, I don't know. I think my taste just changed. What basically, to me, it just comes down to, how much consonance and dissonance and ambiguity you like. And I think I just kind of my tastes changed at some point that I didn't feel the need to to go out like that. I almost went in.
Yeah, well,
you know, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I just uh, yeah,
I mean, I had my experimental period too, where I was hanging out a lot with Paul Bley,
yeah,
and besides him saying things like "Join the avant-garde, Bobby, it's where the money is,"
right.
um, which actually, strangely enough, if you compared the ECM person's salary or concert uh, fee and price
Mm,
to somebody who was recording for Jerry Deakins,
right.
what you're
Sure.
getting for live performances,
Mm,
or you know, um, there's a degree of truth in that there are
mm,
people who pay more for a more experimental uh,
sure.
style. That for some reason that would happen, and I think that maybe the music is a little more codified these days too. Like there's a certain crowd that plays the original compositions and just only want to play their own original things, and that either borders on
Hmm.
modality or something that's untraditional, let's say, or breaking away from tradition. And then there's other people who follow their the more traditional path.
Right.
Like so I had this period where I decided when I lived in Montreal because besides Nelson Simon and Charlie Biddles, there weren't any people there that really could play straight ahead jazz the way I could
Mm,
used to playing it in New York. I had about a year or so, and I had a deep friendship with Paul Bley of trying to say, okay, well, let me see. Paul would say, you've played enough straight ahead, you've got that down. Now, like, it's time to invent your own song.
mm,
So I did that for a while, and I ended up making a record of free jazz with John Abercrombie and Paul.
mm.
And then I tell people right after I did that, I ran into the arms of Walter Davis Jr. I just had the need to swing.
Right.
It was, you know, and I think that may be one of the things that I'm getting to, about maybe you're not wanting to.
I just didn't feel the need. I didn't feel the need to. I mean, I saw kind of the trajectory. I mean, I saw your trajectory. I saw the trajectory of a lot of artists, and I just didn't. I just didn't feel the need to. I mean, I just feel like there's still meat left on the bones of of playing tunes. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, well, I mean
I'm not saying
that's
it's the
how
right way. I'm not saying it's the wrong way. It's just me being true to myself. It's
I
just what
mean,
it's how I feel. Like I said. my tastes changed. You know, there was a time when I did feel, you know, when I was younger, that I did feel that I needed to do that, and then I stopped feeling that way. And I mean, I just found that there was like a whole other world within, you know, you're playing, or Sonny's playing, or Monk's playing, or Elmo, or whatever, you know, that wasn't the only way to go. You know, going out wasn't the only way to go. And when everyone's going out, it also just becomes, I mean, that stuff starts to become as contrived, you know, as, you know,
or more so. Yeah.
what they were trying to avoid. So, I mean, you know, to your, you know, Shakun Sangu, each person, you know, to their own. It's just how I felt, and just me being true to myself.
No, and that's admirable, I think. And
I never say that this is the only way or this is what everyone should do. Because I've seen my own taste change so much over the years that I don't ever say that this is the way. And I know I always warn people, if anyone's telling you they, you know,
well, also, I think that you didn't go to college. That you kind of went to the streets and started to jam at smalls and did had the history that you've had of
mm,
actual activity. Because I've found, and I guess you've done quite a bit of master classes and stuff like that. That like I mean, I would ask people, how many of you know, and they all know the contemporary players that are playing. Like if I ask for a show of hands of how many of you know Chris Potter, or how many of you, know. Um, but if I say how many of you know Johnny Griffin,
mm,
somebody might say, well, he's that guy on the Monk record, right?
right,
And Johnny made like maybe 150 records or something like that
yeah,
in his lifetime. So, you got, because you were hanging out with cats who would say, hey, you ever hear Tina Brooks?
right,
And there,
mm,
then you say, oh, gee, that's he really, you'd have that. Where if you go to school, there's like 10 or 12 people, and they're pretty much who's mentioned.
right,
And
yeah,
so, the fact that you never got told in a codified way what was good for you, what you should do, or, you knew, well, I better listen to Bird, I better listen to Lester Young.
right,
And then, it's sort of like a friend of mine who read Samuel Beckett, and he really had deep, affection and uh, curiosity about everything Beckett wrote.
mm,
So he read just about everything that Beckett wrote, and then he said to me when they were talking, he said, so then I said to myself, what do I do now? He said, well, maybe I'll read everything I think that Beckett might have read.
yeah,
And that kept him busy for the rest of his life reading.
sure,
So it's sort of like, if you know Bird or Sonny Rollins, you say, well, what did he listen to growing up?
yeah, yeah,
You know?
absolutely. So I always
And
tell people, go to the source, go back, you know, reverse engineer. But
now your classical music, this is an interesting aspect that not everybody knows about you, which is also, uh, it relates, I think, to what we're talking about direction and this kind of thing. Like you've been composing orchestral and chamber music, and one says classical music, but I think when you say classical music, you think that somebody's trying to write like Beethoven. You know what I mean? But
right, I've
let's say,
tried, didn't work.
yeah, right. I mean,
I wish I could.
don't we all, man? I still think the late string quartets. I talk about modern.
Mm,
I don't know too much more of modern than ba boo dee
no,
doo dee doo doo.
mm,
And
gross fugue. Mm,
yeah, and there's that other one that's ba ba da ba doo dee da 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 dee. I have no
mm,
voice because of that
mm,
operation.
mm,
I think it's 130, Opus 135.
mm,
Anyway, and you know, anyway, there were intervallically. There was something
yeah,
else.
sure. Mm, yeah,
What's funny when people don't talk about him being deaf, um, that I realize that the longer I play music, and it probably is happening with you too, there are things you hear inside your head. You almost don't need the piano. If you've spent enough time with these notes, you hear things so clearly inside you that,
mm,
I mean, it is amazing that he could
yeah. I
do
mean,
all that.
I mean, there's also some. I mean, I know people. There's some people can just. I mean, some people have very fast processors. You know, Chris Byers is someone that can do that. I mean, he hears everything crystal clear in his head. Like he can write a big band arrangement, you know, on a bus, you know, with just manuscript paper, and just, everything will be perfect. You know, I mean, so you know, I need to sit down, and I'm kind of a slave to the piano, but I wish I could hear that clearly. But
So who are your influences like in your non-jazz compositions? You know, I know that you've written a beautiful requiem, which I heard, and you have a string trio, which I listened to some of, and I've got to
mm.
go back to it. But you know, tell me a little bit about your history. First of all, you're listening to classical music. When did that? Did you always do that, or let's talk about that for a
I
minute.
mean, you know, I always listened to it, but I didn't, you know, I thought I knew. I thought I knew about classical music. Uh, and then about 10 years ago, I through a friend of mine that was going to Juilliard, actually had started studying with a guy there named Kendall Briggs. And I had really, you know, I'd been interested in it. And I had said years ago that I wanted to study composition, classical composition, and I never got around to it. And finally, this friend of mine started studying with Kendall, and I just decided to go for it. And I went to him, and we basically just started from zero, went back down to like, you know, 4-part harmony root position through, you know,
Your taste,
forward,
and all
you know, just it was the hardest thing one of the hardest things I've ever done. And and yeah, and through, you know, counterpoint and harmony and into composition. Um, but and along the way, my, you know, my tastes have changed over the last 10 years. You know, things that I heard when I first started, I hated, and now some of my, you know, favorite music. Uh,
for
but
instance,
for instance, you know, late Stravinsky, Requiem canticles. So, you know, so that I couldn't stand when I first heard it. I was just like, you know. I mean, I remember my teacher playing me stuff, and you know, I thought I knew what was up, but I didn't know. I mean, I still don't know. I maybe know a little bit more after studying for many, you know, 10 years or whatever. But I mean, as I said, it's a, you know, it's a long process of learning and developing taste, and writing, a lot of writing, and just editing, and, you know, learning how to, you know, it's difficult. I love doing it, but it's very difficult. And it's, you know, I finally found a way to make less money than playing jazz.
there you
So
go. Now there's something a little bit paradoxical too, at least to me, that I found that um, you know, I mean, you're you know a wonderful improviser, and you do write music, but you've never really done, to my knowledge, many jazz compositions,
mm,
um, even in terms of original changes or even writing lines or based on other tunes.
yeah,
Like,
not
is there a
much.
reason for that, or
I don't know. I I don't know why. I just never I never felt the need to. Uh, and the classical, you know, writing is just it's a completely different thing. It's totally compartmentalized for me. It's, you know, like split personality. I'm a Gemini, so
uh-huh.
that is, not that I believe in any of that, but yeah, it's totally compartmentalized. And writing, for me, writing classical music is a completely different process than writing. You know, I mean, the little bit of jazz writing I've done, but it's another thing, different, completely different thing for me.
It's, yeah, that's interesting to me. You
Mm.
know that you have no aspirations to kind of let's say is another direction to go into. You know, since we're always growing and we're always kind of you know changing. You're happy just playing tunes. You feel that that's been
I mean, my evolution I feel is slow as a jazz musician, and I mean, I change, but it's kind of it's a very slow growth, and I'm happy with that. You know, I enjoy playing, and I enjoy the amount that I grow, and I, you know, I'm always learning, and I'm always learning new songs, and, you know, my playing is changing, and, you through years and years of playing, things start to evolve kind of naturally. I never wanted to force my evolution. I never wanted to force it as a jazz musician. I always felt like I wanted to just let it naturally evolve. And so that's what I've done. And then my writing, my classical writing stuff is just another thing.
Yeah. So one thing also I was thinking is that it seems to be a shame. I'm glad you got this teaching thing in the city here because, otherwise, I mean, especially having a family on the way and everything. And we could talk about Lucy for a minute, where
Yeah.
you guys got together a few years ago now. How
Yeah. I think it was 4 years ago. I think it's our third wedding anniversary on Saturday.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
We were together for, I think it's 4 years ago since we got together.
And she came from Armenia and is a wonderful singer and also
Yeah.
a violinist, I take it, looking at your
Yeah.
wall.
She's yeah, those are her violins and I think it's called a Duke. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on the name of that instrument in the middle. It's an Armenian.
It sounds like the Brazilian guy, Daduka, but it's not.
Yeah, Taduka. Yeah, it's not Taduka.
So Dudziak, and that's not it either because that's somebody else.
Yeah. But she's an amazing singer. She's an amazing musician. She sings jazz, but she also sings Armenian music. She's an amazing graphic. She's an amazing artist. She's just multi-talented, amazing person, beautiful person. I got very, very lucky. I married up.
You married up. Well, that's good.
So.
That's how we don't want to marry down.
Yeah.
And also while I was thinking though, is that there's such a dearth of places to play in America.
There's such a what?
A dearth. I mean, a lack of places to play. It seems in America, and I mean, it's been that way for a long time, at least 40 years really, where since you could make a cross country tour and stop anywhere but Chicago maybe or Detroit or
right
now, even those cities, there's no more.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you try to make a career touring America, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah. Some people do it. Some people, I mean, there's still places to play. It's, I like being in New York. I like playing in New York. I like playing with New York musicians. I mean, that's also part of it is traveling. It's, it's not often that you get to bring your group, your working group with you. And at least for me, and I know the same case for you a lot of the time as well. So I like being in New York. I like playing in New York.
Well, I just did an interview with somebody about Sonny Stitt, and he said, well, Dan Morgenstern described Sonny Stitt as a lone wolf in the sense that he never really had a working band and always traveled alone with the rhythm section. I said, like he was the only one?
Yeah, right.
Lone wolves.
Well, everyone. I mean, growing up in Toronto, I used to go see Clifford Jordan. Everyone used to come play with local rhythm sections.
Oh, that's what I mean. I mean, I was
Joe Henderson. I saw everyone play with Bernie Sinensky and all. I mean, there were great local rhythm sections in Toronto, but those guys used to go everywhere and do it.
Right. There was an A-list rhythm section everywhere. I mean, even in Europe, I had one group in northern Italy, one group in central Italy, and another group at the bottom of Italy. Because I couldn't even afford on the days off. Where do you put the band?
Yeah.
How do you? Yeah. So if you didn't have a big record company, you're gonna pay for those days off in the hotels.
Yeah.
You have to. You have to have good friends that'll let you stay on those days off. And I mean, is that how you did it too? A lot of the time when you were traveling,
yeah,
you still are.
Sure.
I mean, I told this to Gene Pearl a couple of weeks ago, but it's worth telling again. That Mike Brecker once said that he said, I envy you the way you travel. I said, you envy me. I mean, you travel first class. You stay in like the best hotels everywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're getting paid.
Yeah.
Like we won't even talk about that. He said, yeah. He said, but you, on your days off, when you got days off and this and that, you have real friends in all of
Yeah.
these countries that you hang
I
with.
mean, dude, we've had great time. I mean, we have had great times traveling. And I also, I love playing little clubs. I think of all the little clubs, all the places with like Cafe Central and all the places in
Yeah,
Spain that we used to work, all the little, I just, I mean, I always like playing small rooms better than playing theaters and big, stages and stuff.
yeah, I do
So
too.
lucky, I mean, I always have a great time on the road.
One of my funny stories of Chet Baker was strange that way because it wasn't that he had stage fright or something, but he just didn't like large venues.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the time we'd have like a very well paid festival venue to do. And he would find a way to mess it up. Either
Mhm.
he'd be very late or he'd be in a bad mood about something
Right.
or sometimes he'd miss the concert. That wasn't so often. Or he would just might be too high to really play the
Right.
way he would.
Mm.
But then after the concert and after we'd had this not such a good experience at the festival, he'd knock on my door in my hotel room. He says, man, there's a nice rhythm section playing around the corner. And the piano player is a good friend of mine, and this cat's
Mm.
really good. Why don't we get our horns? Let's go over there and play with these guys. And so
Mm.
we go to this little room, and then Chet would play like an angel.
Yeah.
He was all of a sudden comfortable and relaxed in
Right.
the in the in that room.
Mm.
So there was an intimacy. I think that's what it is. There's an intimacy of a smaller venue
Mm.
that
Yeah.
unfortunately,
I mean, I also love playing without a microphone. I
yeah,
prefer
that's also
musically.
nice. That the yeah the yeah the I think just feeling the vibes of the people
Mm.
close to you too. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
on top of you necessarily,
Right.
and seeing the faces of your friends. Sometimes you've got your
Mm.
buddies and friends of all sexes, races, and everything, but they're sitting in
Mm.
the audience, and you know that there's three or four of them that are really hearing everything you're playing,
Yeah.
and really
Mm.
could actually tell you how well you played tonight as opposed to last night, which they rarely would venture to that, but you knew
Yeah.
that
Mm.
they were listening close enough for that.
Mm. Sure.
So that's a good point. I think a
Mm.
smaller room, smaller venue, and I think like you've gotten to know a lot of people in different places, and
Sure.
in a way that somebody who's with a major label or touring A-list touring doesn't always get to
Mm.
experience. I think
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have gotten that. One other thing I was thinking about the racial situation in one thing I kind of observed in a certain way when I came back to New York in the late '90s uh, was it was a little bit more even at Smalls. There were always exceptions, and then there's the Kenny Washington's, Peter Washington. I mean, there are most of the black guys, I think, and don't have an attitude. But have you experienced any kind of discrimination or Crow Jim or what's been?
No, not for me. No, not really. Can't
Yeah,
really think of anything. I mean, my experience with players is always if you can play, you're cool. I mean, that's been my experience. I mean, personally, but yeah, I've never really had to deal with that. But yeah,
so that
complicated
hasn't really been a
situations.
part of your.
It hasn't been my experience. I mean, yeah, like I said, with the people that I've dealt with, it's always been, if you can play, you're cool, whether you're, you know, man or woman or whatever color you are, religion that's kind of overrides all that.
Yeah, I just remember noticing when I came back to New York in the late '90s that there seemed to be more bands that were all black and more bands that were all white.
Hmm.
There was and I think maybe that's happening a little less now. But I remember being a little bit surprised because when I'd gone out of New York in the '70s, there seemed to be much more of a
Right.
but
Hmm.
a mixed,
Yeah.
um, you know, and yeah, I was just curious about that.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. I've never really had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've not either. I just remember one
Mhm.
night going up to this after hours club called Joyce's House of Unity.
Mhm.
It was on Columbus Avenue. It wasn't that far uptown. It was like Columbus Avenue in the 80s. And
Mhm.
they opened at 4 in the morning, and they checked you for weapons when you came in. And there was a closed circuit TV on the outside so they could see who you were.
Nice.
You know, you know, somebody liked you playing, they might lay a line of coke on the table, and
Uh-oh. Yeah.
it was a pretty far out situation.
Yeah.
And Eddie Moore, who was a great drummer, he played with Rollins for a while,
Mhm.
and very big guy, weighed about almost 300 pounds, I would say,
Mhm.
and made the set of drums look tiny next to him. I mean, it was like that. So I brought Tom Harrell in one night, and the two of us played, and we were the only white guys in the place,
Mhm.
and we had played a pretty good set. And Eddie says really loud, "Damn, these honkies can play." But it was another thing.
Yeah.
So, anything else that we want to cover? I think we've covered uh, quite a
Well, it's a
lot.
lot of
Oh,
ground.
your brother Phil,
Yeah, Phil.
I got to say, he is so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I remember him when he was like 17. He started
Yeah.
sitting with me
No, yeah.
around that time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's a great drummer.
he's a great drummer.
Yeah.
And you can hear him on some of Grant's things. And also he's a wonderful teacher. My two younger children, I have my 16-year-old Anya and my
Right.
9-year-old
Right.
Mona, who take his course that he does. He teaches the children. It makes these little bands, little rock bands for the younger kids over at the Church Street
Right.
Music School of Music and Art, which is where Grant's Tribeca Jazz Institute is located as well. And so they take his courses there, and he had them playing. Man, really had them sounding good. I got a
Yeah.
little sleep, and
Yeah.
he got Anya on drums and bass, and Simona plays the piano, so she was doing that. And he was so patient, and my
Hmm.
kids just loved him so much. They were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, Phil," and
Well, Phil's a great. I mean, Phil's an amazing jazz drummer, but most people don't know this. He's a really good rock guitar player. Like he can shred on the guitar, like heavy metal and rock. He's got more chops on guitar than a lot of guitar players I know. He's really kind of amazing. So
well,
he plays bass and guitar. Like he play rock, bass, and guitar. So he works with a lot of the kids with
I
that.
remember hanging out with him one night, and he had an acoustic guitar with him, I think,
Mhm.
and he started singing me some of his pop songs.
Yeah,
I think he'd written a
yeah.
few
He writes rock tunes,
really
pop.
nice tunes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe he feels that he doesn't want to be unfaithful to jazz or something. What do you
No,
think?
he does rock gigs sometimes. He does his writing stuff for himself. He doesn't he writes for himself. He does it on his own, and it's just for him. He's not set on getting it performed or anything like that. But he does occasionally do a he was playing with the guitar player from the New York Dolls for a while, did some rock gigs. But
Oh,
yeah, jazz is his main thing. But he still loves to play rocks.
yeah, I saw that about him. It's funny because
Uh,
he could divide himself that way without losing anything as a jazz,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And well, I know that it must be wonderful. I play with my daughter Emily
Mm.
sometimes, and
Yeah, he's a fantastic singer.
yeah, you did a gig or two
Uh,
with us too.
I don't.
And, yeah, I remember we did that. Yeah, we did one gig at Smalls. Yeah, I have it on tape.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and but I mean, there's something about making music with your family, and
Yeah, I mean, if they're good, it's great.
my sister Joy, I got to put in too. Also
Yeah.
did a beautiful record again, she does these things and they never come out.
Mm,
Cole doesn't know it, but she did, like some beautiful tunes of her own and an arrangement of Never Neverland from Peter Pan that's
mm,
really different kind of thing. Vinny Zumo, the guitar player, played on it with her.
mm-hmm.
And then my brother Richard also, I mean, it's just something about familial things, I think, that,
Yeah,
that make it so nice.
yeah, yeah. It is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Anyway, any final closing thoughts?
No, just thanks. Thanks for thanks for being so generous. With your music, you made a big influence on me. That's for sure.
Oh,
You know,
thank you.
I feel lucky to have met you as a kid and continue to be friends with you all these years. And also just tell people, check out the Tribeca Jazz Institute. It's part of Church Street School of Music and Art. That's a nonprofit. So any donations are 100% tax deductible. You can donate directly to the Tribeca Jazz Institute. We're having a fundraiser November 2nd, and that'll be up on the website as well. And we have an open jam session next Thursday night.
Oh,
So
great.
special guest is Vincent Herring.
Oh, wonderful.
So all welcome, 7 to 10 p.m. Bring your horn or your whatever you play, and it's a great hang. And you'll see what the school's about. It's a very relaxed vibe, and it's all about music.
Well, that's great. And thanks for the nice thing you said about me. And anybody wants to study with me online,
Yeah,
just
study with Bob if you're smart.
go to robertmover@gmail.com and I will answer you. And I thank you, Grant. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I learned some things about you. I've known you for, oh my gosh, it's like 40
35
years,
years or something.
35, almost 40 years. And, I found out some things I hadn't known about you. Fascinating things that make up the fascinating guy that you are. And, all the best with uh, they say, one doesn't like to say good luck. So I just say congratulations on the pregnancy.
Thank
And
you.
I can't wait to see for the baby to meet their Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
And, and um, anyway, I thank everybody. And if you are watching this and you like this, enjoyed it, I mean, do what they do these days and give us a like on social media. You know more about that than I do. And I'd like to thank again Grant for being our guest on the Real Side. And next week we've got the great pianist Michael Wolf will be with us. And also he's got another teaching gig, so he's going to finish teaching, and we're going to start at 4:30 next Thursday as well. Once more, I'd like to thank Jessie Kaiser for all the stuff that she does in helping us put this together. And once again, Grant, thanks again. And I'd like to say goodbye to everybody.
Thanks, Bob.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks, Jesse. And thank you, the audience, for the public. Bye bye.